Well, thank you for inviting me to this meeting. It's good to see some faces I recognize and everything. I am Karen, and I am a compulsive overeater, and I am not normal with food. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet. I write them down, commit them to my sponsor, eat only those things I commit, and I do not eat in between no matter what. And abstinence is the most important thing I do for myself every day. And one day at a time, it is saving my life. And my abstinence date is February the 1st, 2022. Um, a total, absolute miracle. I never dreamed I'd get 2 weeks, say nothing of a year, and 680 some days, I think it is. I haven't looked in a couple of days, so I don't remember exactly. Um, so um, when I say this has saved my life, it absolutely has. When I came here in actually in January of 2022, I was walking with a walker. I couldn't go up and down stairs. I hurt all the time. My arthritis was so inflamed that I was just miserable all the time. And my mind was a mucky swamp with chaos and fog and all kinds of stuff that didn't really work very good anymore. And I was really wondering if that was going to be the rest of my life. And I grew up. I live in Oregon, in the United States, on the West Coast. So it is noon here, my time, and I grew up in rural Oregon. My father was a logger. He worked in the woods. He cut down trees, and that was his job. And he knew more about conservation and how you should take care of things before being environmentally aware was popular. And my mother was a stay at home mom. She never learned to drive. She was a rageaholic, raised a stoic, and I was every opportunity that was available when I would show too much emotion, I was given in no uncertain terms that that was bad. So I learned at a very, very early age to push all of that down and present this outwardly compliant, good daughter, while inside I was this out of control, rebellious kid that turned into the same sort of adult. And at 18, I already had 2 children because I decided at 16 I knew more than anybody needed to know, and I was gonna get away at any cost and plotted with my boyfriend to get pregnant so I could leave, and I did. And so at 18, I had 2 children and realized I was in control of the food. Oh my goodness, what power I had. Um, and realized not too long after that that I had married somebody that didn't want to work. And so, in order to be able to have a roof and food and everything, I became a married single mom working all the time and eating to numb everything that was going on because one of the things we never did in our family is talk about problems. Problems were not to be discussed, and um, it was okay for my mom to say something about the neighbors, but she would always qualify it that, well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but, and so, and then this tirade against, So I learned to people please at a very young age. Girls were mean and boys were nice. And I wanted to be with my father outside doing the things he did, like taking care of the cows and the barn and the garden and, you know, doing all the stuff outside because he never yelled at me. He never called me names. And my mother
10
was a
down. No,
constant.
5 down, 10 to go.
All right, thank you so much. And so for the next, 60 some years, I was this outwardly compliant and inwardly rebellious person. In October of 2019, I was in a car crash and not hurt terribly bad, but sprained both of my thumbs. And so for 6 to 8 weeks, I could hardly do anything because you really can't do much without your thumbs. And I decided a couple of months after that I was going to sell my big house. I had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,850 square feet, which isn't terribly huge, but it was big compared to what I live in now, which is my tiny home of 400 square feet, which I absolutely love. And I love the community I'm in. And it was the best decision I'd made in a long time. And I've been involved in church since I was a small child, went to a community church um, as a child because I could be from home. And it was a place my parents would let me go. And but I never belonged really because I couldn't make sense of why it was okay for a boy to tell a lie and it was horrible for me to tell a lie. There was this double standard that men could get away with things and do things because they were men and women couldn't, and women had this place where they were supposed to be wives and mothers and you know and and I never fit into that role very well because I was forced into being the breadwinner because the person I was married to wouldn't. And we had kids, and kids need clothes and food, and, we needed a place to live. So I fit into that role. So that's what I did. And because I was a compulsive eater in denial and not aware of any of that, I I would try every diet known to man and I'd lose 40, 50 pounds and then gain 60 or 70. And then I'd lose 30 and then I gain 50. And it was just this constant hamster wheel of gaining and losing and gaining mostly. And so in January of 2022, I was desperate. I was so desperate that I was willing to do anything. In When I moved in March, or actually May of 2020, just after COVID and lockdown and everything, people moved in. I didn't have anybody on either side of me for a while. And after a while, people moved in next door to me, one on each side, and they were GreySheeters. And I had no idea what that was. But I learned that these were happy people in normal sized bodies, and they treated me like I wanted to be treated all these years that never happened, with kindness and compassion, and let me be who I was. And there was no, well, Karen, you're awful fat. You really need to do something about that. There was none of that. It was just this. And one day I talked to my neighbor and we were eating lunch there's a creek behind my house and I have a picnic table back there and we were having lunch back there. And I said, "Tell me about this food thing, what you do with food." And she said, "Oh, okay." And she reached in her pocket and brought out a picture and showed me a picture of her at 340 pounds. And she's in a normal size body. And I was just blown away. It was like, how can that happen? And so then she started telling me, well, I knew that they didn't eat certain things, the white, you peel them and, mash them and do all kinds of things with. They didn't eat those. And they didn't eat sugar and stuff like that. But I didn't really understand or know. But I learned a little bit, enough to have me sitting there beside her saying, I can't do that because I can't do without that white stuff. there's no way I cannot have the the noodly things. And so um, we went our way, and we talked, and it was we were neighbors.
5
And
left.
in January, all right, thank you. So in January, I said, okay, I'm ready. And she said, well, tomorrow we'll get together at 9 o'clock. And before I could even respond, she said, "Oh no, I'm not doing anything right now. Come right now." And so I went, "Oh, what did I do? Too bad the email didn't get lost. She didn't know who it was and said, no, I don't want to get involved in this." All of those things but I got to her house. And by the time I got there, she said, um, I have found somebody that will be your sponsor. We don't do this without a sponsor. And I found somebody that will be your sponsor if you call them at 7:15 tonight. And so I promised that I would, and I did. And I have this amazing sponsor that has been so patient with me. I asked so many questions because I've done all kinds of diets, worked with nutritionists, worked with, diet doctors, I mean, I've done the gamut. And and she would just very patiently answer me. And on the 31st of December, I made a mistake. I was multitasking while I was fixing my dinner, and I just put all of the vegetables on the scale that I was cooking and ate them, and went back to clean up after dinner and went, "Uh-oh, I put I didn't commit that vegetable, but I put it on my plate anyway." It was weighed and measured, and I went through this thing in my mind. Okay, I don't need to talk to my sponsor. It's Gray Sheet food. It was weighed. It's not a big deal. And I had all kinds of justifications and reasons, and I did that for about 8 hours. I couldn't go to sleep. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, "All right, I will contact my sponsor in the morning." And I went to sleep and slept for about 3 hours and got up, and that's the first thing I did is I contacted my sponsor. And she said, "Oh, honey, it's okay. You just made a mistake." And I said, "Well, I did. I made a mistake. But what happened after the mistake was not a mistake. That was my addict brain taking over and doing the things that it will do. And today, no matter if I've been doing this almost 2 years, I have to be very intentional. I have to be absolutely focused on what I'm cooking. I have my little log right here that I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. I apologize. Oh my goodness. So sorry. Anyway, I have my little book that I keep my food written down. And I if the TV's on, I I mute it, music, anything that's going on, I turn all of that off so that I am very intentional in what it is that I'm doing. Because even I made a mistake the other day, and even after looking at the book, I I measured it wrong, and so I immediately called my sponsor, and it was still 4 ounces. I committed 2 and 2, and I did 3 and 1, and so and so I was okay, and I went, "Oh," But I know if I am not very intentional, and the things that I've learned in these rooms and with is that I can make a mistake and still be accepted. The first time I cried in a meeting, I was certain, I was absolutely convinced that somebody would call me up and say, "We don't need that kind of thing in our meetings. You need to just tone it down." And nobody did. It was like I was accepted right where I was and who I was. It's such a miracle. Such a freedom to be able to be who I am
One
and not
minute.
be okay, thank you. And not be chastised every time I make a mistake, like what happened as a kid. And so I'm learning how to do things instead of why do I have to do this? I'm learning how. And the freedom that I have received and the life that I have, I'm 90 plus pounds down from when I started. And um, a blouse that's been hanging in my closet for 2 years, I can now wear, um, because I kept it because I like the color, and there's just so many things. Having a family and being accepted and being with people that have this same problem that I can say, "Oh my gosh, I'm just going crazy with these food thoughts today." And they know exactly what I'm talking about, and we can talk and be, a support for one another. And this is my family. I This is how I get from one day to the next. I do this one day at a time. I don't do it alone, and none of us have to do it alone. And I'm so thankful and so grateful. And that's my time. Thank you so much for letting me share today. And if anything, it we can do this together.